And Vedika Bahal is with me in the studio. So, Vedika, Donald Trump may have announced a ceasefire in Iran, but it's done little to quieten the growing wave of Democratic lawmakers calling for his removal via the 25th Amendment. Tell us more.
Yes, Jenny, it's true that scores of Democrats have been raising the alarm about Donald Trump's mental stability and have been calling for his removal, saying that he is unfit to serve. And this is after he used genocidal language at Iran on Tuesday, where he posted, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." There was also his expletive-laden Easter Sunday post where he told Iran to open the strait or that they will be living in hell. And this tentative ceasefire agreement hasn't done much to quash these calls for removal, because over 80 House Democrats have made social media posts saying that Trump's cabinet should invoke the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, declaring him unfit to serve, or Congress should impeach and convict him, or both. Now, multiple Democratic lawmakers have posted online saying that Trump has continued to decline, that he's not fit to leave, calling him unhinged.
All right, folks, welcome to Dr. John Podcast. Once again, a bipartisan coalition in Congress, including Republicans breaking ranks, has publicly demanded Trump resign or face removal through the 25th Amendment or impeachment. The pressure is coming from every direction simultaneously, marking a seismic shift from fringe speculation to the center of American legislative power. When asked about his mental fitness today, Trump delivered one of his classic non-answer answers that somehow manages to say everything and nothing at the same time. What is your response to critics who say your mental health should be examined? Trump responded by claiming he hadn't heard such criticism, which is remarkable, given that he's been hearing exactly that criticism for over a decade. He then pivoted to his favorite topic, trade, insisting that the country was being ripped off for years until he came along. It was vintage Trump deflection, the kind of rhetorical sidestep that has served him well through countless controversies. But this time, something felt different.
Or maniacal for threatening genocide. I also want to show you Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's post, where she says that this 2-week ceasefire, in fact, changes nothing. She said, "We have gone, all these incidents and plenty more have clearly driven the US past the threshold for impeachment or invocation of the 25th Amendment." Similarly, House Representative Yasmin Ansari, who is the only Iranian American Democrat in Congress, she said that she was momentarily relieved by this ceasefire announcement, but it hasn't really changed the fact that Trump made such an extreme threat of genocide and war crimes against Iranians. And she says that she thinks that he is mentally unstable. Now, as I said, Jenny, this is just a glimpse of a few of the reactions, but over 80 Democrats have now posted calling for Trump's removal from office.
And Vedika, what's the Republican reaction been?
Well, Jenny, the Republican lawmakers honestly have been much quieter, but the reactions we have seen have been more divided. For example, the Republican Senator for North Dakota, Kevin Cramer, he wrote that the ceasefire, in his opinion, proves that Trump is showing the world that the US is the strongest nation. And he says he's grateful for Trump's...
The deflection seemed less effective, less convincing, less capable of changing the subject. The question lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Medical experts who have observed Trump's behavior from afar are now describing this moment as fundamentally different from everything that's come before. The resignation demands have crossed over from being purely Democratic talking points into actual mainstream political discourse. These aren't just progressive advocacy groups demanding Trump go. These are sitting members of Congress, people with real power, people with voting rights and committee assignments and actual institutional authority. These are people who matter in the governing of the country, and they're saying Trump needs to step down. Some Republicans are saying this out loud now.
Unwavering dedication to the United States. Other Republicans, however, have posted that they do not agree with Trump's extreme language threatening the destruction of an entire civilization. And they say that this type of rhetoric is against American principles and cannot be excused. Now, I think what's also interesting is that Trump's increase in violent threats have also turned off some of the very voices that have helped get him into office, like MAGA influencers. So we can certainly see some cracks forming in his right flank. For example, Alex Jones took to his show this week to call for Trump's removal, saying that he sounds like an unhinged supervillain from a Marvel comic movie. We've also seen posts from former Trump ally and Congresswoman, former MAGA ally, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She also echoed that same thing, saying it's evil and madness and not a single bomb has dropped on America, calling for the 25th Amendment. Now, even Tucker Carlson, who has previously said that Trump survived his assassination attempt because he believes God chose Trump to lead the country. Now, Tucker Carlson has called...
Not a ton of them, but some. And that changes everything about how we understand where the political center actually is right now. It reveals what people actually think in private when they're not performing for their base or protecting their political futures. Trump has always possessed this incredible ability to survive every scandal, every controversy, every crisis by simply refusing to back down. He insists that his supporters are loyal to him unconditionally. He insists that the media is biased against him and fabricating stories. He insists that everything is a witch hunt designed to destroy him. That strategy has worked for years. It's been his core playbook the entire time he's been in public life.
Trump, the Antichrist. And according to the Wall Street Journal, he told US officials and communicated to them, urging Trump to resist any attempt to launch attacks that would kill Iranian civilians. So we can certainly see a divide forming there between former Trump allies and the Democrats, of course, and the Republican Party. All of these calls for his removal.
Indeed. So how does the 25th Amendment work? Break it down for us, Vedika.
Well, Jenny, the 25th Amendment was added to the US Constitution in 1967. This is after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It has 4 sections and essentially it outlines the succession for the White House and the rules around presidential disability or removal. And it is this Section 4 that we've seen the US lawmakers refer to. And this one has never been used before. It concerns the removal of a president that is unable to perform their duties, i.e. is incapable of serving but will not transfer power voluntarily. And this would authorize the vice president and the majority of either the cabinet or another body determined by the lawmakers to declare the president unable. And Congress then, either by a 2/3 vote in either the House or the Senate, would have to agree. The chances, though, of Donald Trump being removed from office are low, as we know. Of course, that the Republicans have control of both of those chambers. It is a difficult amendment to invoke, and those closest to him would have to opt to remove him against his will, essentially.
But now you're seeing something genuinely different emerging. You're seeing the actual machinery of government starting to question whether Trump can stay in office. You're seeing institutional power flexing in ways it hasn't flexed before. What triggered this explosion on Capitol Hill and brought us to this moment is a convergence of multiple serious issues all happening simultaneously. Obstruction of justice allegations have become serious and specific and are being actively investigated. War powers controversies have erupted where Trump is accused of overstepping his constitutional authority in dramatic ways, making major decisions that only Congress is constitutionally allowed to make. Court rulings are actively going against him and limiting his power and his ability to do whatever he wants. All of this is piling up simultaneously like a perfect storm. Members of Congress are looking at all of this evidence and legal trouble and reaching the same conclusion. This is different from the last crisis. This isn't just about politics anymore. This feels real. This feels serious. This feels dangerous to the country. This feels like action might actually be necessary. So they're forming a coalition. They're making formal demands. They're saying resign right now or face removal through impeachment. The fact that this is going mainstream and that both parties are somewhat involved is huge because it changes the political conversation in fundamental ways. When resignation talk is just something fringe people are doing on social media or in small circles, it's easy to dismiss and ignore. You can pretend it's not happening. But when it's coming from inside Congress, when it's coming from people who have actual power and actual votes, that's completely different. That's not something you can ignore. That's a warning sign. That's a serious signal that something has shifted in the political landscape. That's politicians essentially saying, we're thinking about this seriously. We're not joking around. We're actually considering whether the 25th Amendment might be necessary. We're actually thinking about whether impeachment articles should move forward. We're actually measuring whether we have the votes. We're actually doing the math. That kind of talk, even if it doesn't immediately result in action or removal, changes the dynamic fundamentally. It changes how people talk about Trump. It changes how the media covers him. It changes how the public understands the situation. It puts Trump on notice that Congress is serious and that the political establishment is running out of patience with him. And here's the kicker that makes this whole situation even wilder and more historically significant. We've actually been here before. This exact scenario, this exact kind kind of moment played out after January 6th. It's like watching a rerun of a movie you've seen, but with higher stakes and different circumstances. More than 200 members of Congress demanded that Trump resign. Cabinet officials were quitting in protest and releasing statements that shook the foundations of the administration. There was genuine chaos in the government. The 25th Amendment was being seriously discussed by serious people. Impeachment was being actively prepared. Trump was under genuine pressure like never before. So he did something very Trump. He didn't resign. He didn't leave office. He didn't go away quietly. That's not who he is. That's not how he operates. But understanding that his legal position was actually genuinely threatened for maybe the first time in his presidency, he released a scripted video. In that video, he said there would be a new administration inaugurated on January 20th. He promised an orderly transition of power. He even used the word smooth multiple times. It was the most conciliatory and cooperative thing Trump has ever publicly said. But he didn't actually step down. He didn't resign. He stayed in office. He wrote out the term to the very end. So the question everyone is asking now is whether 2026 is going to be different from what happened in 2021. Is Congress actually going to do something this time? Are they actually going to follow through on the threats? Or are we going to see the exact same movie play out again where Trump refuses to resign, Congress makes demands and gives ultimatums, and then eventually he agrees to some kind of transition language and stays in power anyway? That's the tension. That's what makes this moment so incredibly dramatic, because we know what happened before. We have a historical precedent. We know that pressure doesn't automatically equal removal from power. We know that angry speeches and formal resolutions don't automatically kick a president out of office. But we also know that the pressure is real now. We know that something has shifted. We know that Congress is running out of patience. We know that the political temperature is higher than it's been. So let's dig deeper into what's actually different about this moment right now and why resignation talk suddenly matters more than it did a month ago or a year ago. The key thing to understand is that resignation demands have a long history in American politics. They're not some new invention. They're not unprecedented. But historically, they've been completely partisan. They've been purely one side yelling at the other side, while the other side completely ignores them and defends their president. Democrats call for Republican president to resign. Republicans defend their president and attack the Democrats. Republicans call for Democratic president to resign. Democrats defend their president. Nothing actually happens. The cycle just repeats over and over. That's the normal historical pattern. But what's happening now in 2026 is genuinely different, because you're getting both sides expressing concerns. Or at least you're getting enough Republicans saying it that it's not just partisan theater and political posturing anymore. It's becoming a real political question about whether the president can remain in office. When resignation talk goes mainstream like this, when it becomes part of the actual political conversation in Washington, it means several different things are happening at once simultaneously. First, the allegations or the scandals or whatever triggered the demands must be serious enough that even members of Trump's own party are thinking maybe they need to do something about this situation. It's not just Democrats being mad anymore. It's people in the same party saying they need this to end. They need a different approach. Second, it means that Congress is starting to view removal or resignation as a real option that they're actually considering rather than just political posturing and empty rhetoric. They're actually contemplating whether they have the votes. They're actually doing the mathematical calculations. They're actually asking themselves seriously whether they could actually remove him through formal constitutional proceedings. That's a real shift in thinking. Third, it means that the political cost of defending Trump has risen to a level where some of his own people, some Republicans, are willing to publicly break ranks and say so out loud to the media. What makes this moment in 2026 different from January 6th is interesting because it gives us a template to understand what's actually happening. Back in 2021, after the Capitol riot, Trump was facing genuine and immediate removal pressure. Over 200 members of Congress said publicly that he should resign. His own cabinet was resigning in protest and releasing statement after statement. Some members were saying he committed treason. Some were saying he was unfit to serve. Some were calling for immediate removal. The pressure was intense and immediate and came from all directions. But Trump responded by doing what Trump does. He dug in. He refused to resign. He insisted that everything was fake news and the media was lying. He said his supporters were the most loyal people in the world. And then understanding that his legal position was actually threatened for maybe the first time in his entire presidency, he released that video. He said there would be a transition to the next administration. He conceded he wasn't running again. He promised a smooth transfer of power, but he didn't resign. He finished his term. He served until the end. The historical precedent matters because it shows us what could happen now in 2026. The pressure might build. Congress might threaten impeachment and removal. Resignation demands might go mainstream. The Capitol might be in chaos, but at the end of the day, Trump might still refuse to step down. He might weather the storm. He might ride it out. He might release some kind of statement promising cooperation or a transition. He might make gestures toward accepting the will of Congress, but he might not actually resign or leave office. That's the pattern we saw before. That's what happened in January 2021. That's the historical precedent. So when we see resignation talk going mainstream right now, we have to remember that this has happened before, and Trump survived it and stayed in power. But here's what's different this time that actually makes it potentially more serious and more consequential. The allegations aren't just about incitement or negligence or poor judgment or rhetoric. They're about obstruction of justice, which is a serious criminal allegation. They're about war powers violations, which are constitutional issues. They're about court rulings that are actively limiting Trump's power right now. These are legal and constitutional issues, not just political ones. And that matters because it brings different actors into the conversation besides just politicians. Judges are ruling against Trump and limiting what he can do. Prosecutors might be investigating him for actual crimes. Members of Congress are looking at the legal record and saying if they allow this to continue unchecked, they're complicit in undermining the Constitution. That's a different kind of pressure than Trump faced in 2021 when it was more about the insurrection and his rhetoric. Another thing that's different is that the demands are more structured and formal. Now, there's an actual House document titled Support for the Removal of Donald J. Trump from Office. This isn't just people yelling or making speeches or posting on social media. This is formal documentation. This is official paperwork. Members of Congress are putting their names on official documents saying Trump should resign or be removed. That's a higher level of formality and seriousness than what happened after January 6th. That's closer to the kind of structured pressure that could actually lead to impeachment articles being drafted and voted on. It's closer to the kind of institutional response that could lead to 25th Amendment proceedings. It's the groundwork and the foundation for something more serious and more consequential. And then there's the question of Trump's political position and leverage right now in 2026. In 2021, Trump's party still largely controlled Congress, even though Democrats had won the House. Republicans still had the Senate. Trump had leverage over his party. He could threaten to withhold support from Republicans in their re-election campaigns if they moved against him. He could threaten primary challenges to any Republican who voted for his conviction. He could threaten to leave the party entirely. Trump's political power was still real and present, even if his legal position was weakening. But now in 2026, Trump's political situation is different. We don't know all the details from the research, but we know there are court rulings destroying his legal shields and obstruction charges that are serious. That suggests his political leverage might not be as strong as it was. His party might be more willing to step away from him. His supporters might be softer. His base might be declining. And that changes the calculus of whether anyone would actually vote to remove him if he was formally impeached by the House. The really interesting and important part is that resignation talk being mainstream means it's becoming normalized as a concept. It's becoming a normal part of the political conversation. People are having serious conversations about it. News channels are discussing it every day. Commentators are analyzing the implications. Lawmakers are debating whether to ask for resignation or move to impeachment. And when something becomes normalized in political conversation like this, it becomes easier to actually do it. It stops being radical. It stops being extreme. It becomes part of the normal range of political options. So the fact that resignation talk has gone mainstream doesn't necessarily mean Trump will resign, but it does mean that the removal process feels less radical and extreme and more possible. It means Congress might actually feel empowered to move forward. It means the conversation is shifting in a direction that could lead to real action. Understanding the critical gap between what Congress is saying and what Congress can actually do under the Constitution is essential. Right now, Congress is saying resign or face removal. That's the ultimatum. That's the demand. But the actual power to make that happen is limited and constrained. constrained. Congress can't just kick Trump out because they want to kick him out. Congress can't vote him out because they're angry at him or frustrated with him. There are constitutional procedures that have to be followed. There are vote thresholds that have to be met. There are specific requirements that have to be satisfied. And those requirements are really high. That's why the Constitution makes removal so difficult and so rare. The founders didn't want it to be easy. So when you see Capitol Hill erupting with demands for resignation, when you see members of Congress on television saying he needs to go, remember that those demands are political pressure and political theater, not constitutional law. They might be effective. They might push Trump toward resignation or toward some kind of transition, but they don't automatically remove him. They don't have legal force by themselves. What Congress can actually do is impeach him in the House with a simple majority vote of 218 votes, then send that to the Senate for trial. They need 2/3 of the Senate, which is 67 senators, to convict and remove him. That's the real constitutional power. That's the mechanism that actually works. That's what Congress can actually do that has legal effect. Everything else is pressure and rhetoric and negotiation. So the question is whether Congress will actually follow through and impeach. Because if they don't, if they just make demands and then back off when Trump refuses, then they've shown that they're weak. They've shown that they don't have the power to back up what they're saying. They've shown that they're just doing political theater. And that matters because it affects whether Congress can be taken seriously going forward on any issue. We have a historical template for how this actually ends. In 2021, Trump faced intense removal pressure. More than 200 members of Congress demanded he leave office. Cabinet officials were resigning. The Capitol was literally damaged and under siege. But Trump didn't leave. He didn't resign. He stayed. He finished his term. He served all the way to January 20th. Congress didn't impeach him a third time, even though they probably had the votes and the support. They didn't invoke the 25th Amendment. They didn't do anything. They just let him serve out the rest of his term while making demands and threats that he ignored. So if history repeats itself, if the pattern stays the same, we might see a similar scenario now. Congress demands resignation. Trump refuses and says it's a witch hunt. Congress makes threats about impeachment and removal. Trump digs in and doubles down. Eventually, maybe Trump releases some kind of statement promising cooperation in a transition and a smooth transfer of power. But he doesn't resign, and Congress doesn't actually move forward with formal removal proceedings. That's one possibility, and it's based on actual historical precedent. But there's also a possibility that 2026 is genuinely different from 2021 because the legal situation is more serious and more grounded in actual law because court rulings are actually limiting Trump's power right now because obstruction charges are on the table and being investigated because something has genuinely changed about his political position and his leverage. In that case, Congress might actually follow through. They might actually impeach. They might actually vote on conviction in the Senate. And we might actually see a different outcome than we saw in 2021. We might see actual removal happen. That's the tension. That's why this moment is so incredibly dramatic and important. We don't know which version plays out. We're watching history happen in real time, and we don't know how it ends. Resignation talk going mainstream signals that Congress is serious, at least on the surface. It signals that the political temperature has risen to dangerous levels. It signals that members of Congress are actually considering whether Trump should be removed from office. That's not nothing. That's real. That's a significant shift in the political conversation from what we saw even 6 months ago. But it doesn't automatically equal action or removal. Resignation demands going mainstream is necessary for removal to happen, but it's not sufficient by itself. Congress has to follow through. They have to vote. They have to risk political damage by formally impeaching. They have to go through the whole constitutional process. They have to weather Trump's response and his supporters' response. Resignation talk is the first step, the beginning. But there are a lot of steps after that. There are a lot of ways it could go wrong. Resignation talk has gone mainstream, and Congress is seriously debating removal, but Trump's playbook is denial, deflection, and mobilization. We're in uncharted territory. The system is under strain, but whether Congress can actually enforce removal or will back off remains the defining question of this moment. The outcome will determine whether constitutional checks still work or are fundamentally broken.